Some dogs don't bark when something is wrong. They pull you away before you ever know it was. The rain had been falling for hours, steady and cold, tapping against the thin metal roof of Ethan Cole's cabin like a patient hand that refused to leave, and inside, the world felt small, dim, and distant, the kind of quiet that pressed in too close when a man had been alone for too long. But Rex wasn't resting, not tonight. The German shepherd stood near the door, muscles tight beneath his damp fur, ears locked forward as if listening to something beyond the storm, something Ethan couldn't hear. Not yet. And then, without warning, Rex lunged, teeth catching the sleeve of Ethan's worn flannel jacket, pulling hard, insistent, not playful, not curious, but urgent in a way that made something deep in Ethan's chest tighten. "Hey, easy, boy," he muttered, trying to shake him off, but Rex didn't let go, his amber eyes sharp, focused, almost pleading, and when he pulled again, stronger this time, Ethan felt it. That old instinct he'd learned years ago overseas, the one that told him when something wasn't right even before he could explain why. And so he let the dog lead, boots thudding softly against the wooden floor as he followed, the door creaking open into the cold night, rain immediately soaking through his clothes, sharp and biting against his skin, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and pine. And for a brief second, Ethan hesitated on the threshold, looking back at the dim glow inside the cabin, the only place that had felt even remotely safe in months. But Rex pulled again, harder, dragging him down the short set of steps and out into the open yard, the mud slick beneath his boots, the storm swallowing every other sound except the steady rhythm of rain and the dog's strained breathing. And then, just as Ethan turned to question him, it happened. A deep crack split through the night, not loud, but heavy, final, like something giving way after holding too long. And Ethan spun around just in time to see a section of the cabin roof sag and collapse. Inward behind him, wood folding into darkness where he had been standing only seconds before, the sound muffled by the rain but undeniable, real. And for a moment, neither of them moved, the storm continuing as if nothing had changed, but everything had. Ethan's breath slowed, his eyes fixed on the broken silhouette of the place he had been about to spend the night in. And then he looked down at Rex, who had already turned away from the cabin, gaze fixed toward the tree line beyond the yard, not relieved, not finished, but alert, as if whatever had just happened was only the beginning. And when the dog stepped forward, tugging once more, quieter now, but just as certain, Ethan didn't resist this time, because somewhere between the rain, the silence, and the way Rex refused to look back, he understood something without needing words. The dog hadn't just pulled him out into the storm. It was leading him towards something waiting beyond it. Rex moved ahead with a steady, deliberate pace, no longer pulling frantically, but guiding with quiet certainty, his body low and focused as he stepped past the edge of the yard and into the dark line of trees where the rain softened into a whisper against the leaves, and Ethan followed without speaking, his boots sinking slightly into the wet ground, each step carrying him farther from the broken shape of the cabin behind him and deeper into something he did not yet understand. The forest felt different at night, not empty, but watchful, the kind of silence that did not come from the absence of sound, but from something holding its breath. And every few yards Rex would pause, ears tilting, nose lifting into the damp air as if measuring something invisible, then continue forward with the same quiet resolve. And Ethan felt it again, that strange pull of instinct, the same one that had once kept him alive in places where hesitation meant everything. Only this time there was no map, no orders, just the rhythm of rain and the steady presence of the dog leading him onward. The ground began to slope gently downward, the trees growing thicker, their branches weaving overhead until the sky disappeared into a dark canopy. And the air changed, cooler, heavier, carrying a faint metallic scent that did not belong to the forest. Ethan slowed slightly, noticing how the sound of the rain seemed to dull here, as if the earth itself was absorbing it. And then Rex stopped completely, his body going still in a way that made Ethan's chest tighten, not fear, but awareness. The dog lowered his head and stepped forward carefully, placing one paw against the ground and holding it there, as if feeling for something beneath the surface. And that was when Ethan noticed it too. Not a sound exactly, not something he could hear with his ears, but something he could feel through the soles of his boots, a faint, steady vibration, so subtle he might have missed it if Rex had not shown him where to stand. It came in intervals, soft pulses that traveled through the damp earth and into his bones, measured, deliberate, almost like a heartbeat buried far below. Ethan crouched slowly, pressing his gloved hand against the ground, the mud cold and slick beneath his palm, and there it was again, a gentle tremor, then stillness, then another, and he found himself counting without meaning to, the way he used to when listening for patterns, waiting between moments that mattered. 1, 2, 3. The pause stretched, then the faint pulse returned, not random, not natural, something with rhythm, something repeating. Rex let out a low breath, not quite a growl, more like recognition, and began to paw lightly at the spot, scraping away the top layer of wet leaves and soil with careful, controlled movements. Not digging wildly, but uncovering, as if he already knew exactly where to look. Ethan watched as the dark earth gave way to something solid beneath, a dull surface catching what little light filtered through the trees. He reached forward and brushed the mud aside, revealing the edge of metal, cold and smooth under his fingers, far too straight to be natural, and as more of it came into view, he saw the faint outline of a shape, a rectangle set into the ground, its edges nearly invisible beneath years of dirt and growth, and at its center, barely visible beneath the grime, a worn marking, faded but unmistakable, something man-made, something placed here on purpose long before the forest had begun to reclaim it. Ethan's breath slowed as he sat back on his heels, the rain tapping softly through the leaves above, Rex standing beside him, eyes fixed on the hidden surface as if waiting for the next step. And in that quiet moment, with the steady pulse still rising from beneath the earth, Ethan understood that whatever had brought them here had not just begun tonight. It had been here all along, buried, silent, waiting for something or someone to finally listen. Ethan did not move for a long moment, his hand still resting against the cold metal as if it might respond to his touch, the faint vibration continuing beneath his palm in that same steady rhythm, patient and unhurried, as though whatever lay below had all the time in the world, and the rain above seemed distant now, softened by the canopy, reduced to a quiet ticking that blended with the pulse beneath the ground. Rex shifted beside him, lowering his body slightly, ears forward, not tense but focused in a way that told Ethan this was not a threat, not yet, but something that mattered, something that needed to be understood, and slowly Ethan brushed more of the mud away, revealing a wider section of the surface. The metal was weathered but intact, its edges too precise to have been placed here by accident, and as he cleared the center, the marking became clearer, a faded insignia pressed into the steel, worn by time but still recognizable enough to stir something in the back of his mind, something familiar, something tied to a part of his life he had tried not to revisit. He leaned closer, squinting through the dim light, tracing the outline with his fingers, the shape of it pulling at memory like a half-remembered name. And then it clicked, not all at once, but enough to make his breath slow and his chest tighten slightly. It was military, old, older than anything he had worked with directly, but still part of the same language, the same system of symbols meant to mark what was hidden and who it belonged to. Rex let out a soft exhale and stepped closer, placing one paw gently against the metal, exactly where the vibration seemed strongest, and Ethan felt it again, more clearly now, the pulse traveling upward in measured intervals, steady as a clock. He found himself counting once more without thinking. 1, 2, 3. The pause stretched, then the faint tremor returned, and this time it felt stronger, as if whatever was below had noticed something above. He pulled his hand back instinctively, not out of fear but awareness, the kind that told him this was not just an object, not just a forgotten piece of equipment, but part of something larger, something designed with purpose. He shifted his weight and scanned the edges more carefully, and there, partially hidden beneath a layer of packed dirt, he saw it. A narrow seam running along one side, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. The outline of a door, not large, maybe 3 feet wide, built to sit flush with the ground, concealed so completely that it would have remained unseen for decades if not for the dog beside him. Ethan reached toward it, fingers brushing along the seam, feeling for anything that might give any sign of a handle or latch, but there was nothing obvious, no external grip, no lock exposed to the surface, just smooth metal and the quiet persistence of that pulse beneath it. Rex shifted again, stepping back slightly, and then forward, nudging Ethan's arm with his nose, not impatient, but urging, as if reminding him to pay attention, to listen in a way that went beyond sight. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the rhythm settle into his thoughts, letting his breathing slow to match it, and then he heard it, not through his ears but through the pattern itself, a sequence, subtle but deliberate, the spacing between pulses not entirely even, a variation that repeated every few cycles, and he realized it was not random at all. It was structured, intentional, almost like a signal waiting to be recognized. His eyes opened slowly as he looked down at the hidden door, the forest around them holding its quiet, the rain now barely more than a distant presence, and Rex stood still beside him, watching, waiting, as if he had known all along that this moment would come, that the storm had not brought them here by accident, and that whatever lay beneath that sealed surface was not simply buried. It was calling, not loudly, not urgently, but with a quiet persistence that only something patient enough to wait for years could possess. And Ethan understood then that finding it had only been the beginning. The real question was whether he was ready to answer it. Ethan kept his hand hovering just above the seam, not touching it now, but feeling the rhythm through the air as if the space itself carried the pulse. And for a moment he did nothing, not out of hesitation, but because something in him understood that this was a threshold, the kind that did not open twice in the same way. The forest around them had gone still in that quiet, watchful way. The rain reduced to a distant murmur beyond the canopy, and even the wind seemed to hold back, as if waiting to see what he would do next. Rex shifted slightly at his side, his breathing slow and steady, eyes fixed on the metal surface, not anxious, not uncertain, but grounded, as though he had already accepted whatever lay beyond it. Ethan exhaled slowly and lowered his hand again, this time pressing his palm flat against the center where the vibration felt strongest. The pulse met him instantly, firm and deliberate, and without thinking he adjusted his pressure, matching the rhythm, pressing lightly. During the pause, easing during the tremor, the way one might respond to a coded knock rather than force a locked door, and for several seconds nothing changed. The metal remained still beneath his hand, the forest silent, the world holding its breath, and then the pattern shifted, just slightly. The pause lengthened. The next pulse came slower, deeper, and Ethan felt it travel not just through the ground but through the metal itself, a resonance that answered his touch rather than resisted it. He drew his hand back quickly, not in fear, but in recognition, and as he did, a faint sound emerged from beneath the surface, not mechanical in the usual sense, but something softer, like a distant mechanism waking after a long sleep, a subtle shift beneath layers of time and earth. Rex's ears lifted higher, his body leaning forward just a fraction, and then the seam that Ethan had traced began to reveal itself more clearly, not by moving outward, but by releasing, the edges separating with a quiet precision that spoke of design rather than decay, a thin line of darkness forming where there had been none, and a breath of air rising from below, warmer than the rain-soaked forest, carrying with it a scent that did not belong to the outside world, not soil, not rot, but something cleaner, almost preserved, like a place sealed away from time itself. Ethan watched as the outline of the hidden door became unmistakable now, a rectangle set perfectly into the earth, its surface lifting just enough to break the seal, and he stepped back instinctively, giving it space, his eyes fixed on the opening as it widened slowly, not sudden, not violent, but deliberate, controlled, as though whatever lay beneath was not reacting to intrusion, but acknowledging arrival. The gap revealed only darkness at first, deep and complete, but the pulse did not stop. It continued from below, steady and patient, now clearer than before, no longer filtered through layers of soil, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, not fear, but awareness of something larger than himself, something that had existed long before he ever set foot in these woods. Rex stepped forward to the edge of the opening and paused, his head tilted slightly downward, listening, not to the silence, but to what moved within it. And when he looked back at Ethan, his gaze held a quiet certainty, not a question, not a warning, but an invitation, as if to say that whatever this was, it was not meant to remain hidden any longer. And Ethan, standing at the edge of the open earth with the rain fading behind him and the unknown breathing softly below, realized that the storm had not led him here by chance, and that sometimes the things buried deepest were not lost at all. They were simply waiting for the moment someone was willing to step closer and listen. Ethan stood at the edge of the opening for a long moment, the faint warmth rising from below brushing against the cold rain still clinging to his clothes. And something about that contrast made the moment feel unreal, as if he were standing between two different worlds that had never meant to meet. Rex did not hesitate. The German shepherd stepped forward with quiet confidence, placing one paw onto the metal edge and then lowering himself carefully onto the first narrow step that had been revealed beneath the lifted door, his body steady, controlled, as though he had done this before in another life. And Ethan felt that same pull again, not forced, not urgent, but certain, the kind that did not argue or rush. It simply waited for him to follow. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the small flashlight he kept, clipped inside, the beam cutting through the darkness below in a narrow line that revealed just enough to make the shape clear, a set of steps leading downward at a gentle angle, built from the same metal as the door above, worn but intact, disappearing into a deeper shadow that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Ethan adjusted his grip on the flashlight and stepped forward, placing his boot onto the first step, the metal cool but solid beneath his weight, and for a brief second, he paused, listening, not just to the faint pulse that still rose from below, but to everything else, the forest behind him, the rain, the quiet. And he realized something subtle but undeniable. The world above felt distant now, as if it were already beginning to fade the moment he chose to step down. Rex moved ahead another step, then another, glancing back once to make sure Ethan was following, his eyes calm, steady, not questioning. And Ethan exhaled slowly before continuing, descending one step at a time, the air changing with each foot he lowered, growing warmer, drier, carrying that same clean scent that felt preserved, untouched by time. The sound of the rain above grew softer with every step until it became nothing more than a memory at the edge of his awareness, replaced instead by the quiet echo of his own movement and the steady rhythm beneath it all. The pulse, clearer now, more defined, no longer filtered through layers of earth. It seemed to come from ahead, deeper, within the structure, and as the beam of his flashlight moved along the walls, he saw that this was not a simple passage. The metal surfaces were lined with faint seams and panels, some marked with symbols, worn nearly smooth by time, others blank, but all placed with intention. This had not been built in haste. It had been constructed to endure, to remain, and that realization settled into Ethan's chest with a weight that was not fear, but recognition. He had seen places like this before, not exactly like this, but close enough to understand the purpose behind them, hidden, controlled, designed to be found only by those who knew how to look. Rex slowed his pace as they reached a small landing, where the stairs leveled out, his ears tilting slightly as he listened to something ahead, and Ethan lifted the flashlight higher, revealing a narrow corridor extending forward, its walls smooth, its floor dry, and at the far end, barely visible in the dim light, a faint glow, not bright, not artificial in the usual sense, but steady, almost like a soft reflection rather than a source. Ethan felt his breath slow as he took a step onto the corridor floor, the metal beneath him giving off a low, almost imperceptible hum that matched the rhythm he had been feeling all along. And Rex stepped forward again, leading the way without hesitation, his tail low but steady, his body relaxed in a way that told Ethan this place was not dangerous, not in the way the world above could be. And as they moved deeper into the corridor, leaving the last traces of the storm behind them, Ethan understood that whatever waited ahead had not been uncovered by chance. It had been revealed, and that sometimes the path forward was not something you chose, but something that recognized you first. The corridor stretched farther than Ethan expected, the faint glow ahead neither growing nor fading, holding its distance as though it were not meant to be reached quickly. And with each step the hum beneath his boots became clearer, not loud, not intrusive, but present in a way that felt almost intentional, like a steady breath moving through the structure itself. Rex walked just ahead, his pace measured, ears tilting occasionally as he listened to something Ethan could not fully perceive, and yet there was no tension in him, no sign of fear, only focus, and that alone kept Ethan moving forward. The beam of the flashlight traced along the walls, revealing more of the same careful construction, panels fitted with precision, seams placed evenly, and here and there, faint markings etched into the metal, not random scratches, but symbols, sequences, patterns that suggested organization rather than decay. Ethan slowed as one of the markings caught his attention, the lines forming a shape that stirred something deeper than memory. Not something he had learned directly, but something that felt inherited. Like a language passed down without words, he stepped closer, raising the light, studying the etching, and for a moment the corridor seemed to narrow around him, the quiet pressing in as he tried to place it. Rex stopped a few feet ahead and turned back, watching him, waiting, not impatient, but aware that something had shifted. Ethan exhaled slowly and moved on, the feeling lingering but unresolved, and as they continued, the glow ahead finally began to change, growing softer, wider, no longer a distant point but a presence that filled the end of the corridor. The air grew warmer still, carrying that same preserved clarity, and then the corridor opened, not abruptly, but gradually, the walls widening into a chamber that revealed itself piece by piece as Ethan stepped forward, the flashlight beam lowering instinctively as the need for it diminished, the space ahead illuminated by a muted, ambient light that seemed to come from the walls themselves, not bright enough to cast sharp shadows, but enough to reveal the room in quiet detail. It was larger than he expected, perhaps 20 feet across, with a ceiling just high enough to stand comfortably. The surfaces clean, untouched by dust or decay, as if time had simply moved around this place instead of through it. Along the walls were panels and consoles, old in design but intact, their surfaces smooth, their edges unbroken. And at the center of the room stood a single structure, waist-high, rectangular, with a surface that mirrored the metal above but carried a subtle difference, a faint glow beneath its surface, pulsing in that same steady rhythm Ethan had felt since the forest. Rex approached it slowly, circling once before, stopping at its side, his head lowering slightly, not in submission, but in recognition. Ethan followed, each step measured, his breathing steady but deeper now, and as he came closer, he saw it clearly, the source of the pulse, not hidden, not concealed, but placed in the open as if it had been waiting to be seen. The surface of the structure responded to his presence, the glow shifting slightly, the rhythm adjusting just enough to be noticed, and Ethan felt it again, that quiet sense of being acknowledged, not by a person, not by anything he could define, but by the place itself. And for a moment he simply stood there, the storm above forgotten, the world outside distant, the dog beside him still and certain, and he realized that whatever this was, it was not abandoned, it was not lost, it had remained exactly as it was meant to be, waiting without urgency, without decay, for someone who would not only find it, but understand that it had never truly been hidden at all. Ethan did not reach out immediately, his hand hovering just above the softly glowing surface, as if crossing that final inch required more than movement. It required understanding. The pulse beneath the structure continued, steady and patient, but now that he stood this close, he could feel subtle variations within it, like layers beneath a simple rhythm, something more complex hidden inside something deceptively calm. Rex remained at his side, his posture relaxed but attentive, his gaze fixed on the structure as though he were listening to it in a way Ethan could not fully grasp, and for a moment the room felt suspended, the air still, the hum constant, the kind of quiet that did not demand action but waited for it. Ethan slowly lowered his hand, his fingers brushing the surface, and the moment contact was made, the pulse shifted, not abruptly, but deliberately, the rhythm elongating, deepening, as though responding rather than reacting, and the faint glow beneath the surface brightened just enough to reveal what lay beneath it, not wires, not machinery in the traditional sense, but patterns, layered lines moving in slow, deliberate sequences, like something alive but not organic, something designed to mimic life without imitating it. Ethan felt his breath catch slightly, not in fear, but in recognition of something he had no words for, something that existed outside the systems he understood, and as he kept his hand there, the surface responded again, the light spreading outward in a soft wave that traveled across the top of the structure and then down its sides, tracing unseen pathways, awakening details that had remained hidden until now. Panels along the walls flickered, faintly, not fully active, but aware, like distant echoes responding to a central call. Rex shifted closer, placing his head near Ethan's arm, his presence steady, grounding, and Ethan realized something quietly profound. The dog was not guiding him anymore. He was accompanying him, as if the path had reached a point where it no longer needed direction, only presence. The patterns beneath the surface began to organize themselves more clearly, forming shapes that felt intentional, not random. Lines intersecting, looping, repeating in sequences that carried meaning. And then, slowly, something emerged at the center of the structure, not rising physically, but revealing itself through light. A symbol, faint at first, then clearer, etched not into the metal but into the glow itself. And as Ethan looked at it, something inside him shifted, the same quiet recognition he had felt before, but deeper now, more certain. As if this symbol was not just something he was seeing, but something he had been meant to find. Rex exhaled softly beside him, his ears relaxing for the first time since they had entered, and the room responded in kind, the hum softening, the pulse stabilizing into a slower, more measured rhythm, no longer searching, no longer waiting, but settled. And Ethan understood then that this was not a place built to hide something away. It was built to preserve it, to protect it until the moment someone arrived who could stand here without fear, without force, and simply listen. And as the symbol continued to glow beneath his hand, steady and unwavering, he realized that whatever this was, it was not offering him a discovery, it was offering him a choice, one that could not be undone, not because of consequence, but because of what it would reveal about him once he accepted it. Ethan did not pull his hand away, not because he was certain of what would happen, but because something in the quiet steadiness of the moment told him that fear would only close a door that had already chosen to open. The symbol beneath his palm continued to glow with a soft, unwavering light, its lines shifting almost imperceptibly as if responding to something deeper than touch. And then the surface changed again, not dramatically, not with sound or force, but with a subtle clarity, the patterns beneath the metal reorganizing themselves into something more defined, more readable, and Ethan leaned closer without realizing it, his breath slow, his eyes tracing the lines as they formed, and what he saw was not a map, not exactly, but something like one, a layered structure of paths and points, connections drawn in light, each one pulsing faintly in sequence, and at the center of it all, where his hand rested, a single point remained steady, brighter than the rest, as if marking a position, not of the place, but of him. Rex shifted beside him, lowering himself onto the floor with a quiet exhale, his body finally at ease, his ears no longer searching, and that alone told Ethan something had changed. The room was no longer waiting. It had settled. The faint hum softened into a background presence, no longer asking, no longer calling, simply existing, and as Ethan watched, the patterns expanded outward, revealing more detail, more structure, and then something unexpected emerged, not in the form of light, but in memory, not his own at first, but something that felt adjacent, like standing in a place where something had once happened and still lingered in the air. He saw fragments, not as images, but as impressions, the sense of this place being built, carefully, deliberately, not in haste, not in secrecy born of fear, but in intention, something meant to last, meant to endure beyond those who created it. And with that came another realization, quieter, but more personal. This was not abandoned because it had been forgotten, it had been left because it had fulfilled its first purpose, and now it was waiting for its second. Ethan's hand remained steady as the central point beneath his palm pulsed once, deeper than before, and the rest of the pattern responded, lines dimming slightly, as if acknowledging a shift in focus, and then the symbol returned, clearer now, no longer just a shape, but something that carried weight, meaning that was not spoken but understood, not fully, not all at once, but enough to feel its significance. Rex lifted his head slightly, watching Ethan, not guiding, not urging, just present, and Ethan realized that whatever this place offered, it was not something that could be taken. It could only be accepted. The room did not demand anything from him. It did not ask for proof or permission. It simply presented itself as it was, and left the rest to him. The storm above, the broken cabin, the years behind him, all of it felt distant now, not gone, but quieter, less defining. And as the glow beneath his hands steadied into a calm, constant light, Ethan understood that the discovery he had made was not something he would carry out of this place in his hands. It was something that would remain with him in a way he could not yet fully explain, and that sometimes what is found in the dark is not meant to be taken into the light, but to change the way you see it when you return. Ethan slowly lifted his hand from the surface, not because the moment had ended, but because something within it had already settled. The glow beneath the structure remained steady, no longer shifting or reaching, as if it had completed what it needed to do. And for a few seconds he simply stood there, his fingers still slightly warm from the contact, his breath even, his thoughts quieter than they had been in a long time. Rex rose gently beside him, stretching once before stepping closer, his shoulder brushing lightly against Ethan's leg in a familiar, grounding way. And together they stood in the stillness of the chamber, the hum now softer, almost like a distant memory rather than a presence. Ethan glanced once more at the symbol beneath the surface, its lines now fixed, calm, no longer forming or changing, and he understood without needing to question it that whatever had been revealed was not something that required further action. It was something that would remain here, complete in its own way, and that his role in it had never been to alter or take, only to arrive and recognize. Rex turned toward the corridor without hesitation, his posture relaxed, as if the path ahead was already known, and Ethan followed, his steps measured, his flashlight still in hand though he no longer relied on it as heavily, the faint ambient light guiding them back through the corridor, the walls silent, the panels still, the space unchanged except for the quiet awareness that something within it had shifted. And as they reached the base of the stairs, Ethan paused for just a moment, looking back down the corridor, not out of doubt, but acknowledgement, the kind that did not need words, the kind that belonged to moments that were meant to stay with you rather than be explained. Then he turned and began to ascend, one step at a time, the air cooling gradually as he climbed, the scent of the forest returning in faint traces, the distant sound of rain slowly finding its way back into his awareness. And when he reached the top, the night greeted him with the same quiet persistence it had held before, though it felt different now, not because it had changed, but because he had. The door behind them remained open just long enough for Rex to step out fully, and then, without sound, without motion that could be seen, it settled back into place, the seam disappearing once more beneath the earth as if it had never been disturbed. Ethan stood in the damp clearing for a moment, the rain now lighter, softer, tapping gently against the leaves, and he looked toward the cabin, its silhouette broken but still standing in part, a reminder of where the night had begun. Rex sat beside him, calm, watchful, no longer searching, and Ethan let out a slow breath, not heavy, not burdened, just steady, the kind of breath that comes when something inside finally aligns with something outside. And as he began to walk back toward the edge of the trees, the forest no longer felt watchful. It felt open, the silence no longer pressing, but resting. And he realized that not every discovery needed to be carried into the daylight to matter. Some were meant to remain where they were found, shaping the way you moved forward rather than the things you held onto. And somewhere beneath the ground behind him, the quiet pulse continued, unchanged, unseen, waiting not for the world, but for the next moment when someone would listen closely enough to hear what had never truly been hidden.